knowing the worst is in store for your daughter, and it's heart-wrenching.
It took more than 4 years before any doctor identified Ashley Mullinex's strange behavior as a sign of a deadly disease.
I think my husband and I cried all night long.
What are you gonna do for my child? You've got to save her.
Next, 2 medical mysteries that defied the experts. When 8-year-old Ashley Mullinex begins to drink more than 3 gallons of water a day, little does anyone realize it's a sign of a horrifying disease that could kill her at any given moment.
Ashley went from 2 or 3 20-ounce bottles a day to 2 to 3 gallons a day. There was something seriously wrong with my child.
For 3 years, Mary and Rich Jordan felt completely helpless as they watched their young son's unquenchable thirst slowly destroy him and their family.
We'd seen so many doctors by then, and they all told us he was fine. And I wanted to believe that.
When on a strike, we look at the doctors for what they can't. If diagnosis is a mystery.
In 1998, finance analyst Amy Perryman and marine recruiter John Mullinex had been divorced for 2 years, but they still had one thing in common: their love for their 4-year-old daughter, Ashley.
Ashley was the center of attention in everything that we did.
She was a great kid. We tried to make sure that whatever was best for Ashley, we followed.
There were pictures of Ashley, John, and myself at his place, and there were pictures of us as a family at my house. She seemed to not even be bothered by it.
And despite the divorce, Ashley seems to be leading a charmed life.
Ashley was extremely healthy. She never seemed to get sick.
When Ashley was young, 2, 3, all the way up to 4 years old, she was just a normal kid.
But shortly after her 4th birthday, Ashley develops a habit that her parents find puzzling.
Ashley would come to me several times a day and request water.
She just started drinking more and more. It was very strange.
She would just refill a 20-ounce bottle of water 7 or 8 times a day, 2 times an hour. That wasn't normal for children her age. She's drinking a lot of water, but my goodness, she goes to the restroom 8, 10 times during daylight hours. That's crazy.
Then the bedwetting started. It was almost a nightly occurrence. We had to go out and buy rubber sheets for the mattress to protect them.
It was becoming quite a problem for her, and I found that to be bizarre. I called and made an appointment for Ashley to see her pediatrician just for a routine physical. The doctor started to run some basic tests, and then we began talking about this incessant thirst. And the doctor had mentioned specifically, these are key symptoms of diabetes. We need to have her screened.
Juvenile diabetes is a disorder in which a child's body is unable to regulate its glucose levels. Unless carefully managed, the disease can be fatal.
I could have never imagined when I held her in my arms for the first time that I ever would be contemplating these issues. The implications were possibly that I could lose my child, that she could die.
If diagnosis is a mystery.
Mary and Rich Jordan's daughter was 4 when they decided to expand the family and adopt newborn fraternal twin boys.
The babies were born and placed into our arms, and I can't explain how it felt. It was amazing.
Joey was actually the larger of the 2. He was 7 pounds, and Patrick was 6 pounds and 2 ounces, I think. What you picture in your mind of a big baby, they had the roles of little tiny sumo wrestlers, they're just, tanks.
But despite their physical similarities, the twins begin to exhibit very different personalities.
Patrick was quiet, just kind of went with the flow. Joey, even from birth, would cry a lot.
Joe wanted food, he wanted his bottle. He wanted to be fed right away. And he would just suck on the bottle, and then, you'd have to pop it out of his mouth and get him to breathe for a second, and he would just go, and then he'd grab the bottle again and stuff it back in his mouth.
And he'd finish that bottle within a couple of minutes, and then he'd just projectile it out.
You would just drape yourself with blankets because you knew the minute you fed him, he was going to vomit all over you.
The boys' pediatrician tells them not to worry. Joey's still eating, gaining weight, and seems healthy. But as time goes by, he gets worse.
He always cried at night, and it got really annoying, and it kept everyone up. And he was always thirsty and always hungry.
There were nights that I'd have to roll Joey's crib out into another room so that Patrick can sleep, because Patrick was sleeping through the night, and I didn't want Joey to wake up Patrick.
He would make a big racket that would wake up Patrick. Patrick is figuring, well, while I'm awake, I might as well have something to eat too. So we would both end up sitting there and we'd be feeding them at the same time. And whoever had Joe would always get done first. They would have to deal with the throw up, but they would get to go back to bed quicker than the other one.
Joey's appetite is a little strange, but in all other respects, he seems normal.
Everything about him was normal. As the first year was going on, he'd roll over when he was supposed to roll over. He'd babble when he was supposed to babble. He crawled when he was supposed to crawl. But I knew as a mother, something isn't right, but I couldn't put my hand on it.
Gradually, Mary begins to realize that it isn't just the amount of liquid going into Joey's body that's astounding.
We would have to change his diaper at least every 2 hours. A lot of times, I'd put a fresh diaper on him, and as I'm taping it up, he'd pee. And one time of peeing would fill the diaper.
And we would weigh him, and I kept a chart, how many ounces is that diaper, and wow, a new record. Kind of bizarre behavior, but we were being driven to extremes because the situation wasn't getting any better. It was actually getting worse.
When the twins are 6 months old, Mary takes the boys to a new pediatrician. But he doesn't think Joey's odd symptoms are anything out of the ordinary. On the contrary, the doctor tells Mary that she may be the one with the problem.
I went in and I said, he won't go to bed without a bottle. Well, don't give him the bottle. Let him cry himself to sleep. So I tried to put him to bed without the bottle. And he screamed, and he screamed, and he screamed. I'm surprised neighbors didn't come knocking on the door to see what is wrong with this baby, because you've never heard anything so loud and so horrible. And the doctors were saying that I needed to become tougher and let him do it, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. I gave in and gave him the bottle.
I think a lot of the doctors thought that Mary was nuts. This woman comes in, she's distraught, she's obviously, at the end of her rope. She's complaining about a child that pees too much and drinks too much and throws up. Come on, lady, just relax, take care of your kids.
For 2 years, Joey has always eaten more and been bigger than Patrick. But suddenly, that pattern begins to change dramatically.
All of a sudden, we noticed that Patrick was outgrowing Joey.
Patrick was the linebacker, and Joey was the petite one. Joey was getting Patrick's hand-me-downs.
He stopped growing completely about age 2.
But again, the doctors would say, hey, sometimes that happens. Kids have growth spurts. So he's just at the end of a growth spurt.
We'd seen so many doctors by then, and they all told us he was fine. Even when he stopped growing, they said he was fine. And I wanted to believe that.
Over the next several months, Mary and Rich begin to notice another odd behavior.
He was very active, but he'd rather do things indoors. Did not like to be out in the bright sunlight that much without sunglasses. And we'd go through Batman sunglasses and Teletubby sunglasses and Barney sunglasses.
I thought he wanted attention because I was little and I wanted attention, and I thought he was trying to steal it from me.
And he would lick the back of his hand and then wipe his eyes, or we thought he was doing it to get moisture in his eyes.
Despite this peculiar reaction, Joey doesn't seem to be in any pain, and his vision checks out fine.
And so we just figured he was overly sensitive to the light, and his eyes were dried out because, there was just dry air.
Who are you?
The twins graduate from baby food and bottles, but Joey's taste in grown-up food seems a little bizarre.
Where most kids want candy, Joey wanted to eat salt. And we noticed he'd add salt to everything. No matter what it was, he'd put salt on it.
My sons would look at him and say, Mom, what is he doing? It's already salty enough. And We would all sit there and just kind of go, that's really disgusting. But he loved it.
I didn't think it was hugely odd. I thought maybe he had some bad taste buds or something like that. He just didn't get the idea or he liked the flavor of salt.
And if he didn't get the salt, he'd scream or cry. So we'd give in and kind of let him eat what he wanted to eat.
The twins are now 2.5, but the similarity ends there. Patrick has been sleeping through the night for months, while Joey is up 3 and 4 times a night screaming for water. Joey's problems are beginning to take a toll on the Jordans' lives.
Got to the point where we were both totally exhausted.
My husband and I were trying to take turns so that we'd at least get 3 to 4 hours sleep between us.
I don't think she got more than an hour's sleep for years. And we kept going on the way we were. At 2.5, we were still up every hour or two taking care of him like he was a newborn baby. But nobody could tell us why.
If diagnosis is a mystery.
Perryman has just received some shocking news. Her 4-year-old daughter, Ashley, may have juvenile diabetes. Now she's waiting with bated breath to find out the results of a blood test that will confirm the diagnosis.
It is difficult anytime you think that your child may have an illness. This is going to be a child who is crossing the monkey bars one minute and the next minute having to monitor what her blood sugar is.
But when the findings come in, they leave the young parents with more questions than answers.
The doctor came in and told us that Ashley's glucose levels were normal. Ashley does not have diabetes. I asked the doctor if there was any other concern that I needed to have as far as her drinking so much water, and they told me everything was fine.
We really had no choice but to accept the diagnosis.
But despite the doctor's assurances, Ashley's compulsive drinking continues to intensify. And by the end of the year, she's going through up to 20 bottles of water a day.
Ashley would try to sneak water all the time. She'd sneak bottles of water, and I would find them under her bed. I was thinking, there has to be limits.
Nothing made sense. We didn't know where to go with it.
Over the course of 3 years, we went and saw 5 to 6 pediatricians.
And there was never an answer. It always came back the same, negative for diabetes.
Doctors confirmed with us and reassured us that there was absolutely nothing wrong with Ashley.
Not sure where to turn next, Amy and John do their best to manage the strange behavior. But it isn't long before Ashley's teachers begin to express their own concerns.
When Ashley was in school, her teacher came to me and she said Ashley was going to the restroom sometimes twice an hour. So when you add up all that time, we're talking 16, 20 times a day.
When I would be in class, I would always have to use the bathroom over and over and over again. And the teachers would always get really annoyed with me. It was frustrating because I didn't know what I was doing wrong. Why can't I not be thirsty?
It's a lot for an 8-year-old to deal with. But shortly after the end of the school year, Ashley begins to develop an entirely new and painful symptom.
I started having a headache. It was horrible. It was very throbby, like something was squeezing my eyes, and just over and over and over. It was really bad.
So I gave her some over-the-counter medication and she seemed to go on about her business.
A headache's a headache. They'll pass. So I didn't think too much of it at first.
But after 4 days, Ashley's excruciating headache still hasn't subsided.
She's not feeling any better and the pain is getting worse. I knew something was very wrong, so we rushed directly to the doctor's office. He said she sounded a little congested and probably had a sinus infection. The doctor prescribed antibiotics to treat the infection. I felt very confident this was all just going to blow over and she was going to be fine.
But the agonizing headaches don't go away. In fact, they intensify.
Over the course of the next 3 weeks, we went to 2 other pediatricians because this sinus infection wasn't getting any better. And all of them prescribed different antibiotics. None of them provided any relief.
I just wanted the pain to go away.
Then, just when Ashley thinks things can't get any worse, another frightening symptom sets in, out of the blue.
And I noticed she was covering her left eye. I pulled her hand away and I said, Ashley, what are you doing?
And I explained to her, I see 2 of you. Like, you're right here, but then there's another you right here.
Her left eye was turning in towards her nose and looking over towards the right instead of looking straight ahead. I was deathly afraid. So we rushed directly to the doctor's office. As soon as we got to the doctor's office, he's looking in her eyes. He turns and he looks at me, and the blood just ran out of his face. This is not a normal happening. He was very, very concerned. Immediately, he sent us to the hospital to have an MRI. I felt like the wind had been sucked out of me. We got in the car and just started driving. I immediately called John and said, there is something seriously wrong with Ashley. What is it that these doctors have missed?
It scared me to death to know something is definitely wrong with my daughter. I got in the car and raced to the hospital.
It was scary because I didn't know what was going on.
As soon as they arrive at the emergency room, the on-call doctor orders an MRI of her brain.
I was beyond concerned. It was becoming, I'm afraid. What is going on? Things are moving very quickly now.
All kinds of things just run through your mind at once.
But nothing could have prepared John and Amy for what the MRI reveals.
One of the physicians came to us and stated that we have found a tumor in my daughter's brain. And I looked at John and I said, this can't happen. This can't happen to our baby. I just leaned up against the wall and I just slid down the wall.
It was hard. Everything I'd ever heard about a tumor was bad. Just knowing the worst is in store for your daughter, it's heart-wrenching.
For all these weeks, I had said, oh, it's just a headache. There's nothing wrong with her. And now she has a tumor in her brain. How do you go to that? How do you get past that?
If diagnosis is a mystery.
For 3 years, Mary and Rich Jordan have been dealing with their son Joey's bizarre symptoms: an unquenchable thirst, projectile vomiting, excessive urination, and an intense craving for salt. All along, the doctors have told them that he falls within the range of normal. Not satisfied, Mary Jordan takes Joey to yet another pediatrician, Dr. Michelle Ernst.
She was young and friendly. We went through the history of Joey, and she listened to me and didn't say it's your fault.
Mary's manner was one of a concerned mom. She knew something was definitely wrong with her son. When he was in the exam room, for a limited time, it was 15 or 20 minutes that I was with him, he had 4 cups of water in that small amount of time and got kind of antsy if his mom didn't give him water. And I thought, that's kind of peculiar. So it made me think something's probably not right here.
She then did a physical on him and asked, has Joey ever been tested for diabetes? And I said, no, he's never been tested for anything. And Dr. Ernst then said, that's the first thing we're going to do because excessive water drinking is a sign of diabetes.
Just a quick urine test that I did showed that there was potentially a problem.
The urinalysis shows that Joey doesn't have juvenile diabetes, but he does have abnormally high levels of sugar and protein in his urine, an indication that there is something wrong with his kidneys.
I knew something was wrong with my child, and she's finally saying there's something wrong with my child.
Dr. Ernst refers them to pediatric kidney specialist Dr. Sheldon Orloff to investigate.
The most striking thing I remember about him and his family is that he came with his twin brother, and he and his twin brother are markedly different in size. It was like meeting Mutt and Jeff.
Dr. Orloff came in and he looked at Joey and talked to Joey.
He's a very reassuring doctor. He's very calm. He knows what he's talking about. It felt really good to have an expert looking at him, because then we thought, we're almost to resolution now.
After hearing the litany of Joey's symptoms and the toll it's taking on the family, the first step Dr. Orloff takes is to prescribe a medication to treat Joey's excessive urination.
That in and of itself was a godsend. If we could get 5 hours of sleep a night, it was just like yahoo.
I wanted to try and show them that we could make their life a little bit better. And at the same time, I introduced this concept that he may have something else going on.
And everything seemed to be going great until he started ultrasounding the kidneys. And in one of the ultrasounds, they noticed that something was wrong with the kidneys.
We therefore proceeded with a kidney biopsy, in which we take a small part of the kidney out, look at it under a microscope, and try and make a substantive diagnosis.
Just before we brought him in for the kidney biopsy, we thought he's losing his kidneys. We didn't know what was going on.
You filter about 40 gallons of water out of your bloodstream every day through the filtering apparatus of the kidney. His laboratory tests showed signs of the filtering not working correctly.
The biopsy shows that Joey's kidneys, which should be absorbing nutrients and filtering out toxins, aren't. Everything is just passing right through them. This is a condition known as Fanconi's syndrome. Fanconi's is not usually a diagnosis in and of itself, but rather an indicator of another, more serious disease.
I was a little concerned, and then I was relieved at the same time, because now they clearly knew at the microscopic level, what the problem was, or at least I thought they did.
So now it was important to try and look at all the possible causes for Fanconi syndrome. One of the major organs that, aside from the kidney, which seems to be the target organ of this disease, is the eye. So I sent him to the ophthalmologist.
We were frightened. Doesn't mean he's going to go blind. So then we were dealing kidneys and blindness. I didn't know. The head of ophthalmology looked in Joey's eyes and within a few minutes said, Joey has crystals in his eyes. And I go, he has what? He has crystals in his eyes.
The ophthalmologist immediately sends Mary back to Dr. Orloff.
And Dr. Orloff had us right in and proceeded to say, your son has cystinosis, this is what it is, this is what we have to do for him.
Cystinosis is a rare genetic disease in which the amino acid cysteine wreaks havoc on the body. In a healthy person, cysteine is gradually absorbed by the kidneys. But with cystinosis, the cysteine builds up and forms crystals, which can lodge in cells and damage tissue.
This is inherited. It's genetic. It comes from a recessive characteristic in the two parents.
The crystals tend to gravitate to the eyes, which causes a sensitivity to light. And the buildup of cysteine in the kidneys means that they can no longer absorb nutrients or water. This leads to excessive urination, which in turn leads to dehydration, low potassium, and a seemingly unquenchable thirst. The inability to absorb essential nutrients can also result in stunted growth, kidney failure, and ultimately death.
So these children typically will crave salt and water to a point that they won't drink almost anything else, and to the point of even keeping them from eating to get the adequate calories they need to grow.
I was so scared. I went home, went on the internet, and the information was very, very frightening. Talking about kidney transplants, they talked about people dying at a young age, and I cried. I think my husband and I cried all night long.
I remember when my sister told me what it was. I was scared. She didn't know what the future was going to hold for him.
Granted, it was not a good, happy diagnosis. At least we know what it is, and we know what we can do to make it better, or at least to make it less damaging than what it was.
There is no cure for cystinosis, but there are medications that can treat the symptoms and help prolong life. Dr. Orloff starts Joey on a drug to reduce the cysteine content in his body, eye drops to remove cysteine crystals in his eyes, and a growth hormone to help him catch up.
Before we understood the disease and could replace the missing chemicals, the children would die within several years. Now that we have the ability to treat the disease, they're living a much longer, healthier, and productive life.
The Jordans are lucky. Cystinosis is a difficult diagnosis to come by.
There are less than 2,000 people in the world with cystinosis. And that's not the first thing that jumps up at a doctor, because most doctors have never heard of it. Dr. Ernst was willing to go in and find out what was wrong. And it was our luck to find Dr. Orloff, who had treated cystonic children before.
You know, we're taught in medical school, common things are common, and you usually think of common things. So you have to be thinking outside the box to get to a rare diagnosis.
If diagnosis is a mystery.
8-year-old Ashley Mullinax has been experiencing baffling symptoms for more than 4 years. First, an insatiable thirst, then blinding headaches and double vision. Now, her parents have just learned that a golf ball-sized tumor is growing in her brain.
At this point, they don't know what kind of tumor it is. They don't know how it originated. What are you going to do for my child? You've got to save her. What are you going to do?
The worst case scenario always rolls through your mind. That was the worst day of my life.
They didn't know what was going on, and I didn't know why all this stuff was happening. That was the scariest thing for me.
Ashley is immediately admitted to the pediatric cancer clinic, and oncologist Dr. Stuart Gold is assigned to her case.
Ashley presented to us with a history of having headaches, some changes in her vision, as well as trouble with urinating too much and drinking too much. Ashley had a mass on her MRI in the third ventricle, in the area of the pineal gland.
The pineal gland is a centrally located area of the brain where many vital nerves and glands intersect.
It was explained to me that Ashley had a golf ball sitting in the soul of her brain, that the soul was where all of the neuropathways connected and crossed.
But as dire as Ashley's condition is, the doctors can't treat her until they determine exactly what kind of tumor she has.
We get clues on MRI scans of what things may be, but we never know what they are for sure until we have a biopsy and can look at it under a microscope. We needed surgery to confirm the diagnosis.
It was like living in a virtual nightmare, that somebody was going to have their hands inside of her brain.
Trying to get a piece of tissue, sometimes you can have bleeding, you can have other complications that could lead to death or neurologic consequences.
There was a 10% chance that Ashley would not survive the surgery at all.
But it was explained to me that not doing the surgery, it was about a 100% chance of death.
When we had to wheel her into surgery, that was the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life.
We had to take a long trip down a hallway to the OR. The hardest part was when the doors closed. You don't know.
Waiting for Ashley to come out of surgery was agonizing.
We didn't know she'd make it through. It was the longest time of my life.
With each passing moment, John and Amy's anxiety only deepens. Finally, after an excruciating 5 hours, the OR doors swing open.
The surgeon came out and she was smiling and she said, "The surgery went well?"
After surgery, the biopsy confirmed that Ashley had a pineal germinoma.
A pineal germinoma is a rare type of brain tumor that is formed by germ cells. In healthy individuals, germ cells play a key role in determining the sex of a fetus. But in patients like Ashley, for unknown reasons, the germ cells travel to the brain and wreak havoc on multiple neurological systems.
Knowing that this had been growing in Ashley's brain for her entire life, that immediately shocked me.
Germinoma evolves somewhere in the development of the embryo as cells called germ cells migrate to the wrong area and they take up home and grow abnormally and cause a tumor. As tumors grow in the area of the pineal and the pituitary gland, they can destroy the pituitary gland. As this happens, the pituitary gland can no longer do its basic function, making hormones that help regulate the body.
In Ashley's case, One of those hormones controlled the production of urine and led to a rare condition called diabetes insipidus.
Diabetes insipidus is when you cannot concentrate your urine. So you keep urinating and urinating, and you get dehydrated and you drink and drink, and it actually looks quite a bit like childhood with diabetes, but it's not.
For years and years, doctors kept looking at me saying all the blood tests are normal, when in all actuality, the blood tests weren't normal. They just weren't testing for the right thing.
And as the tumor in her brain grew bigger, it led directly to Ashley's other symptoms.
The tumor blocked the flow of her spinal fluid. This caused a backup of pressure, and this caused her headaches. Ashley had double vision because she had increased pressure in her brain, causing pressure on the brainstem.
More than 4 years after Ashley's first symptoms set in, Amy and John finally understand what's wrong with their child. And it raises the question as to why it took so long to identify the critical clues.
Childhood cancers and tumors are very rare. I've been a pediatric oncologist here at UNC for about 20 years. We've seen a pineal germinoma a handful of times.
But while the surgery to diagnose the condition is a critical step, Ashley's ordeal is far from over. First, doctors need to determine if the 8-year-old suffered damage to her brain during the operation.
Although the surgery was a success, we were still not out of the woods. We needed to see if there were any effects from surgery. The first question that I asked Ashley when she woke up was, how many mommies do you see?
And I said 1, and she kind of broke down a little bit. I was tired, but I didn't hurt. My head didn't hurt.
It was such a relief to know that, she's okay. Right in that moment, everything's fine.
Still, the worried parents must now face another harsh reality. Ashley will have to undergo treatment to shrink the tumor in her brain.
Dr. Gold initiated a plan for Ashley to go through 3 rounds of chemotherapy and 6 weeks of radiation.
I was a little upset that I had to shave my head. After I did it, though, I was okay with it. I could wear a hat at school, which was really cool because the other kids couldn't.
I learned by far that my daughter was one of the strongest individuals I will ever encounter in my entire life.
At the end of all the chemotherapy and then the radiation treatments, they did another MRI and the tumor was gone.
This is when finally I could take a breath of air.
But while the gravest threat to Ashley's health, the tumor, has been successfully treated, she suffered extensive damage to her pituitary gland and will need to take hormone replacements for the rest of her life.
Everything that the brain would actually direct as far as hormone has to be directed medicinally. So her weight is directly affected, her metabolism is directly affected, and the diabetes insipidus, all of that is regulated through medications that she has to take on a daily basis.
The tumor did the damage, but still, we're pretty lucky.
We were told that if the tumor had gone undiagnosed and untreated, Ashley would have probably had a stroke and she would have died.
Left untreated, Ashley's tumor would have been fatal.
Anybody that has a kid, they're really lucky to, have that gift. And to have it almost taken away from you, it's frightening.